Hello, I'm Eddie Floyd, and this is my life story. I started out in a big family with lots of brothers and sisters. There was 10 of us. We were raised by a single mother for the most part, and life was rough. It was tough. We always attended church. God was always a part of our life. I took, as a young child, I would watch my uncle, who was a pastor at the church we attended. They played guitars and stuff, and I always wanted to play music for God. One time, went up and asked for prayer and said, "Hey, I'd like to play music." So they prayed over me, and with a couple of years of that, I was actually playing music at church by the time I was 10 years old. By the time I was 12 years old, I was playing quite a bit, and I've just played ever since. Through all that, we had periods in our life as kids that, you know, it was rough, because we had people that was always trying to break into our home. We had a lot of people that was trying to get our home, and they would literally show up at our house and break into the house with the girls there and us kids, and they would try to always break in to intimidate my mom into selling the house, is basically really what it boiled down to. And they would do some pretty crazy things. We had several episodes and encounters, being around hunting and all that stuff and around guns all my life, well, that became a part of our life. It was called protection, and that's what we did. I would lay on the couch and go to sleep with a shotgun laying at my side for the protection's sake. Not necessarily for me, but for my sisters and my brothers and all that. And you just learn to do that as a way of life. 15 years old, laying on the couch with a shotgun in my hand, woke up as a guy opened the window up above me, and as I raised up, he raised up the window. I chased him out of our house at 15 years old. And that's the kind of life I had. It was rough. It was very different, and it was very confusing, believe it or not. It was kind of tough to swallow at times, because I'm 15 years old and got to live like this. But there were a lot of good times. I also started staying with the pastor's father, who actually taught me the flooring trade. He seen something in me, I guess, and he told me, he said, "Hey, you're going to work for me." And I pretty well started going to work for him. Well, by going to work for him at 15, in the summertime, days off of school, that I would stay with them. And pastor was 5, I was 15, and literally he would sleep at my feet on a rollaway cot. I learned what grace is from God, because they took me in as though I was one of their own children. It was a point in my life where I was about to go down a bad road with the drug scene, the drinking, just in general, not in a good way. I learned that there's more things in life than what I had already gone through. That there was a way that God had His hand upon my life. The pastor, like I said, he seen something in me, I have to say, and he helped guide me and keep me on the right track that I probably would have never stayed on if it wouldn't have been for him doing that. And that was God, again, intervening in my life to make me something that I turned into, I guess, as an adult. It was very interesting because it was a whole different lifestyle. I got to go to sleep at night without a shotgun. I got to go to sleep at night not worrying about anything. I got to go to sleep at night with people praying, people, loving you. Not that my family didn't love me, because they very much loved me. It was a different type of feeling. You got to see what family was about with the whole family. I'm talking about with the father figure, the mother, the brothers and sisters, and all. You got to see that. And through this, I guess I learned that there was a different way of life. And then, of course, as I progressed, I wasn't no saint by no means. I still had long hair, had a beard, liked to ride motorcycles, and kind of crazy on cars and different things like that. I was getting kind of rough and about ready to leave all that and go on my way. The pastor, knowing that I played music, he seen something, and he put me on the path with a gospel group out of St. Louis called Gene Warren and the Glorylanders, and he sent me over to have a meeting with them. And the day I showed up, I had long hair, scrudgy beard, big leather coat, and I showed up on the motorcycle. And this is a very devout, Pentecostal, very strict religion group, and I showed up looking like this. The man looked at me and he goes, "Oh my gosh, what did I get here? What did the pastor send me?" And we sat there, and he took me to their house, and we started playing, and I started playing music, and he looked at me and he said, "Well, you have to cut your hair, you have to shave, and you have to clean up." I said, "Well, I think I can do all that." Well, I did, and I played music with them for a long time, traveling around the countryside, and had a lot of great time. And then shortly thereafter, I decided to get married, and with being married and having children, we had to kind of quit doing the music thing. Well, throughout all the years of work, I injured my back, and when I injured my back, I ended up having to have back surgery, and it was pretty rough because I couldn't work, and they told me I'd be down for 6 months. Well, in 4 weeks, I went back to work, and they told me not to do it, but I did, and I trusted in God, and God seen me through this once again. Like I said, as a child, He gave me the gift to play music, and now I'm older, and He gave me the gift to go back to work. So I worked, and I've done that for years upon years, where I just trusted in what God would allow me to do, because I'd seen it as a kid growing up, and seen it through being with the pastor and all that. I got to witness, by being at the pastor's house, a lot of things that I probably never would have seen, where God intervened in other people's lives. I seen people get healed of the different things, never thinking that it might be me someday that would get healed. I got to see different blessings happen, where people with no money were blessed with money, cars, different things like that. And it was all, once again, about God showing up when you didn't think God was around. So as I go on further in my life, there come a point where I was ready to quit church again, just because of people's nonsense. And it was like, why do I want to go to church and this is all I see? It was something that was really not the other people. It was actually my own self that created this. And I got to watching folks instead of watching what God had to say. And right about the time I was ready to quit, a gentleman walked up to me after the church service where we was playing music, and he said, "Well, I wanted to tell you something. Today, I came to church," he said, but before I came to church, I had all intentions of killing myself today. He said, "I had all intentions of ending everything. I've watched you sit on that platform for years playing your guitar." And he said, "I've never seen you sway from the way you did. You always got that same vibe about you where you're into what you're doing." And he said, "Just by you doing that and me seeing you being faithful, I no longer wish to kill myself, and I actually wish to go on further and make a bigger commitment to my life with God." Not knowing none of this about who you touch or what you do when you are doing God's will, or you are trying to do what God wants you to do, it kind of changes your whole outlook on life. Now all of a sudden, here's a gentleman that was about ready to end his life, but because I was being faithful with what God wanted me to do, it changed his life. You never know who's watching you or why they're watching you, but it's a big responsibility to do when you are up in front of people, and you always have a certain amount that you have to live up to. I've been doing worship ministry since I was about 12 years old. I started playing in the churches, but doing it, as, worship with the church and things like that, I would say since I was about 18 years old, 19 years old, whether it was with the Linharts or with other people, and then back and forth and whatever, but I've pretty well stayed doing ministry since then. There was a few times where I said I was ready to quit and give up. You sit on the platform from week to week and you look out at the congregation and you see people sitting there going, or you're sitting out there and they're all talking and carrying on, and you get disheartened because you're up there trying and pouring your heart into something and trying to give the people what God wants you to give them, and they're not paying attention, they're not doing nothing, and it gets very disheartening. I guess I learned that I feel what pastors feel like sometimes when they're up there trying to preach, when people are out there doing everything under the sun. And it was very discouraging. One time I did quit for about a month or so, and the young pastor, Linhart, he come to me, and he wasn't a pastor yet, and he come to me and he said, "Hey, I need your help." And I looked at him and I said, "Okay, what do you need my help with?" Well, what he did, they built a new church, and he needed my help hooking some sound equipment up. So being involved in all this and always doing sound and different things with music and all that, I went down and I helped him fix his sound. Well, that's all it took. And since that day, I've never left again. I can't say that I ever really want to not do it. There's times that I have not because of health or whatever, but I've never ever quit playing music or quit being part of the worship teams and stuff. In 2002, I came home from work. I was feeling really rough. I looked at my daughter and said, "Hey, don't go nowhere, I'm not feeling right." Well, she called my wife, who wasn't at home, and she ended up coming home with my mother and her friend, and they convinced me to go to the hospital. Well, when I get to the hospital, they start running tests on me, and come to find out, I had a really bad heart thing going on. They told me if I wouldn't have come to the hospital, I would have probably not made it through the night. They turned around, and that Monday, I ended up having open heart surgery and had 5 bypasses. 2 weeks later, after they did the bypass, I was actually sitting in church, and I looked over at my wife and I said, "Take me home, something's not right." Well, when I got home, shortly thereafter, she had to call an ambulance, and I went back to the hospital. And come to find out that all the bypasses and everything that they had done in the surgery failed. There was no rhyme, no reason why it did, but it all failed. And they actually, with me, my wife, and Pastor Senior, they told us that, well, go home, make a happy list out, and live it, because there's nothing else we can do for you. You are going to die within a short time. I turned and looked at my pastor, and I turned and looked at my wife. I looked back at the doctor, and I said, "We'll see about that, because I don't believe God's done with me yet." I was 39 years old when that happened. Today I'm 62. I think that God wasn't done with me yet. If I go back to my wife, when we met, we were young. She spent a lot of time with the pastors and stuff because of her family life. And that's how we actually became together as a unit, because we growed up together in church. Her father and stuff played music, so I played music with him at church. Met, fell in love, got married, had kids. That's a basic story. We've been together for 42 years at this stage of our life. And we've had some pretty rough times with it. She's been through the heart surgery with me. Well, like I said, that was at 39 years old. Well, it wasn't but another year or so, I think it might have been 2 years, my wife went down with leukemia. And through the leukemia, we actually lost her twice. She stayed 43 straight days in the hospital through this time. The one night, it was me and Pastor Senior were sitting at the bedside with her, and she actually went into congestive heart failure from the chemo, and we almost lost her right then and there. She was pretty well gone, and Pastor and I started praying, and it was shortly after that she actually came back, and we were on our way again. We were sitting at the hospital. I was sitting in the waiting room, and my wife was back in the ICU. Unbeknownst to me at the particular time, my wife was going out again. She was just pretty well gone. And at this particular time when this happened, young pastor, Ed Lenhart, he was at home, and God woke him up out of bed and said, I have to go to the hospital right now and pray for Kay. And he jumped in his car and he drove to the hospital. And when he got to the hospital, he said, the good Lord said, don't go into the hospital, drive around the hospital. It was in Belleville at the Memorial Hospital, so he was able to drive around this hospital. And for about a half hour, 45 minutes or so, he drove around the hospital praying. I was sitting there in a waiting room all by myself, and all at once, I never seen the door open, never heard it or nothing. This man walked in, and he stopped in beside me, and when he stopped beside me, all the hair on my arms, I got a cold chill, everything happened. He said, hello, young man. And I went, hello. I looked at him. He said, how are you doing? And I said, well, I'm having myself a cup of tea. My wife liked tea, and I never drank tea. I said, my wife liked this tea, and I'm having some. All of a sudden, the man just kind of walked to the back door where he was going to go into the ICU, and he went back in there. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm drinking my tea and just thinking whatever. Next thing I know, all of a sudden, this man was standing behind me again. He's standing there behind me, and he says, I think I'll have me a cup of that tea. So he walked over where the stuff was and got him a cup of tea. And I'm still not knowing all this is going on with Kay at the particular time. They hadn't come out and said anything to me. And this man walked back up beside me, and when he walked up beside me, he looked down at me and he said, don't worry, she'll be just fine. She's going to make it. And then next thing I know, he was gone. Well, this was all going on at the same time that Pastor was driving around on the outside of the hospital. It wasn't very much longer after that man disappeared. They come out, the nurse come in and got me, took me to the back and said, we just had a very bad episode. Your wife actually went out and we had to bring her back. Through all this, you know, we've learned really to trust God because we have to, because of what's went on with me, with my heart, and her with this stuff. A year later, she has another form of cancer. And she has to have a complete hysterectomy and this, and it was pretty rough. Well, God brought her through that, and she's doing fine. Through all this here, I still had very many complications with my heart and that. I went back, they put multiple stents in over the years, and I never really stopped working. I kept going. Most people never ever knew I had any issues whatsoever going on in my life, and actually I was in pretty severe health conditions, most of it, for the last multiple years, last 20 years. God has always had something on my life, and I've always been able to just keep on going. Well, this past year, in September, I was working, and I felt really bad. I walked up and down this hill a couple times, and then the last time, I didn't think I was going to make it back up the hill. So I drove myself over to the hospital. When I went there, they did some tests and stuff, and they told me that if I would not have came to the hospital once again, that I probably would not have made it through the night. And this was in September of this year. And they had actually said that my heart was so bad that they didn't know if I was going to make it at all. They went in and they come to find out all my stents and prior surgery, everything that they had done to me, all had closed off and quit working. It was pretty rough to hear all this, but once again, I figured, well, God's going to see me through it. And He has. They were able to put one stent in, and they got it in. And I came out, and I have not felt great since then. After that happened, they put me on some medications, Between the medications and the heart, I ended up having kidney problems, and they tell me that I'm in stage 4 kidney failure, that my kidneys are really not working very good at all, and it's all caused from the heart problems. And through this, they also ended up tell me I had diabetes, which I got the diabetes back under control, and it's doing very good because good Lord's helped me through that once again. But the biggest strain, I guess, is that they are actually talking about having me see the heart transplant and the kidney transplant because they're all failing and they're not getting any stronger, they're not getting any better. I have to continue having my faith in God because I still don't believe He's done with me, because through all this time, all these years and all that, we have put together multiple churches. We went to West Virginia and built the church down there with a team of guys. We built this church that we attend here today with a team of guys. And we're getting ready to do it once again, and we're going to build another part of this church with another team of guys. And I still have to keep saying, even though I'm going through everything I'm going through, God's still there, and He's still got a purpose on my life to finish up what He started. And I'm not done yet, so I don't think I'm going no place. I don't believe that I'm going to end up with no heart transplant. I don't believe that I'm going to have no kidney transplants. I still believe that God's going to heal me just like He has multiple times. I've only had one open heart surgery, but I've had 18 heart catheterizations. And part of the problem with my kidneys, actually, they think could have came from all the heart catheterizations. My heart doesn't work very good at all. A lot of people that know me would never ever know that I have issues even still today. I still try to work. I still try to do things. You know, me and the doctor even had a conversation about trying to work and trying to continue on, and I told him, look, I am not going to lay down. I'm going to keep going because I still believe God has a purpose for me, and that's just how I feel. The one thing I can say is you have to look at the positive in everything. I went to cardiac rehab this time, and I'm in cardiac rehab, and this lady comes in, and she was very distraught, very uneasy. Come find out, this lady was the ultrasound tech that did my stuff. And what was really wild about this, when she did this, is that she had just had a severe heart attack, and she was very distraught, having very hard depression. She says, does it ever get any easier? And I had to look at her and say, well, here's how it gets easier. For one, I trust in God, that He's got my back. And for two, I have to look at all the positive things that happen. I looked at her and I said, you said that your daughter and your grandchildren came in town, and you hadn't seen them in a long time. So was that a positive? And she says, you know what? I never thought about that. But just by me going through what I went through, I got to witness to another lady who was going through something that I had already been through. And she says, how does it ever get any better for you? And I looked at her and I said, the best thing is I find a positive, and I have to remember that God sees me through everything that I go through. There is a rhyme or reason. I don't know what that rhyme or reason is, but I have to keep my faith in God that I can stay with this and keep on going. And it seems like it has worked very well for me to do it like this, to remember that God is always there for me and always brings me through whatever I go through and whatever anybody else will go through. If you allow Him to do that for you, He'll bring you through it. People will say, well, if God healed you, why are you still having these problems? Well, I have to look back at them and I have to say, if God didn't heal me, why am I still here? Because there were too many times where they told me I was leaving, I was done for. And as of a couple of weeks ago, when I went back to one of my doctor's trips, they told me that everything had stabilized, and actually my kidney function had gotten a little bit better than what it was a couple of weeks prior. So once again, I have to look at it and say, you know what, God's got me, and I believe that's where it's going to be. I still play the music every Sunday and every chance that I can. I still try to show up and play music just like God's put in my heart to do since I was 8 years old. And I hope to still be doing that until the day that He does call me home and say that, you know what, you're done. So that's me.